There are 10 things about Wano that hold this arc back from being the perfect prized epitome of a One Piece experience. These were either integral missing aspects, a lackluster continuation of Oda tropes, or some things that just got plain old fumbled. I should also point out that I actually loved Wano, and it's definitely one of my top 5 favorite arcs in the series. However, because, and this is the internet, there is no such thing as nuance, and if I publicly state even one thing about the arc that I don't like, then it automatically makes me a One Piece hater. These are 10 gripes compared to literally hundreds of aspects I loved about Wano. But when everything is said and done, these 10 things stand out to me as uniquely unfortunate. An assortment of bad apples in an otherwise superbly juicy fruit market. And on that delicious note, I'm hungry, so let's begin. Also, for every new subscriber during the month of September, Grand Line Review will be donating 10 cents to Gamers Outreach, so that we can provide Westmead Children's Hospital with gaming carts, equipped with all latest generation consoles to give kids the much needed power to play. We also have a direct donation page, and according to our milestones, we are well into funding our second cart. So if you have the means, please do consider donating, because every little bit helps. And now, a smooth transition back into whatever it is we were talking about. Problem number the first one is Zoro, the tease. Because throughout the vast majority of this arc, it seemed like Zoro was being built up to have an unusual character arc. Something similar to what Sanji embarked on during Whole Cake Island. There are parts of Wano that seem to weigh Zoro with equal protagonistic importance as it does with Luffy, setting up a whole grudge against Orochi for what he did to Yasu, flooding him with the drive to beat Kaido himself, and some ridiculously tantalizing hints about his origins, including the past presence of a samurai who looks exactly like him. But we never quite got there. If Zoro's story was a pool, then what we did was stay in the shallow part near the stairs, you know, the part where all of the toddlers urinate. But we could see the expanse of the pool and the potential of its depth. Wano was a real tease for Zoro fans, and it's not like we got nothing at all. There was plenty to be satisfied with, especially knowing how Shimotsuki Village came about. But I guess to me it was a now or never situation. Zoro will never have a better opportunity for exploration than on a sword-obsessed island where his family almost certainly came from. I don't even particularly care about the Grim Reaper thing. That's a classic piece of Oda intrigue that can be answered at a later date, as can a lot of Wano mysteries, like say Onegashima's original name, or why Wano has all sorts of different climates. All of that stuff is just background flavor that I'm happy to keep shrouded for now, maybe even forever. Something I'm less than thrilled with is Wano issue the second being fake out deaths. Now, to be completely fair, this is not a Wano exclusive problem. Death has always been Oda's kryptonite as a writer, because he is a greedy story man. Oda wants to hit you right in the dramatic nutsack with a death scene, but then also keep his wacky characters alive for feel-good reasons. Oda is the type of person who wants to have his funeral as well as be there to watch it. Just reminds me of a certain story about a boy who cried wolf. That is Oda. Oda has cried death so many times in One Piece that I don't believe any death scene I see, which in Wano is a pretty big detriment because actually, to his credit, Oda followed through on some deaths. Just not for the characters who were actually given death scenes. Oda wrote fantastic death scenes for Kinemon and Kiku, and when I read them, I quite rightfully didn't buy a single piece of merchandise from this charlatan death salesman, and then it turned out that Izo and Ashura Doji actually did die, and I had the same reaction. I didn't buy it. Because this story has trained me not to believe the author who cries death. And that's really sad because they were great characters and it would have been nice to feel the emotional impact of their loss. As it stands, it serves as more of an academic curiosity. The fact that Oda killed these characters fascinates me from a meta perspective, rather than makes me feel anything for the characters in question and the impact on the story. Now, speaking of impact on the story, disappointment number 3 is that Hiyori was yet another princess prop, which is a term I coined a couple of years ago to describe One Piece women whose entire purposes are to serve as motivation for another character rather than actually do anything themselves. Think Rebecca, for example. She was a prop to tell the story of Kyros and not really Rebecca. And Hiyori, in my opinion, turned out to be smack bang on brand. As far as I see it, her primary purpose was a prop to be used to further Denjiro and Kawamatsu's characters, as well as a pathway for Zoro to attain Enma. Although admittedly Hiyori was on the verge of becoming a fully fledged character when she was about to kill Orochi, but she was more so keeping the hilt of that murder blade warm for Denjiro. I think you could take Hiyori out of Wano entirely, and with a couple of minor tweaks, everything plays out pretty much exactly the same. I'm legitimately struggling to remember one significantly impactful thing she did that wasn't in service of a character that Oda actually wanted to explore. What she did do, I suppose, was play in and out all of the acts, which is actually my 4th thing. The act structure lost its way. The idea of dividing Wano into acts was nothing short of brilliant, both thematically appropriate and a way for Oda to treat the arc fatigue that was present during exploring Whole Cake Island and Dressrosa. Completing acts felt like making significant progress, and the intervals between those acts was the reward for doing so. However, I think the system falls apart with Act 3, which for some context, Act 3 alone is longer than the entirety of Whole Cake Island, and came shockingly close to being even longer than Dressrosa. And look, granted, this is definitely the perspective of an ignorant Westerner, but I'm not sure why Oda didn't divide the acts further. Like, say Act 3 is just the Odin flashback, Act 4 is the raid on Onigashima, and Act 5 is the epilogue. Instead, what we have is a very bloated Act 3 that took so long that I forgot the act system was even a thing to begin with. This is an incredibly minor complaint, by the way. Wano has been so good that pretty much everything I'm saying here is a minor issue, except for two big ones, which we are going to save for the end because, whoa, holy crap. Continuing though, my fifth gripe of the Wano arc is Jinbe's reintroduction. There aren't that many moments in One Piece that make me go, hey, that's a bit unbelievable, which is a big credit to a series where its characters can slather themselves in ramen noodles and call it martial art. But what happened with Jinbe here was just so unbelievable that I found it immersion breaking. The fact that he shows up at just the right port on just the right day at just the right moment to start the raid when he didn't even know about the raid is just absurd. No engineering in the world is capable of suspending my disbelief here. In fact, I'll add to that. The person who planned the raid didn't even know which port was the correct one. I love Jinbe. He's fantastic, but this is just a little bit too convenient. And what's worse is that we didn't get any answers regarding the dramatic finale of Whole Cake Island and how everyone managed to escape. Right now, the only explanation I can come up with is that this shockingly convenient scenario ties into a future plot point. Like, say Jinbe ran into a Grand Fleet member and they gave him a piece of Luffy's Vivia card. And I love Jinbe, so I am in this weird spot where his reintroduction was both a high point and a low point of Wano for me. Number 6 is more of a personal preference gripe, as are all of these, but it's not enough Toki. Toki is probably one of the most exciting characters in ever. This being that has come hot out of the Void Century oven. She knows so much, not only about the history of this world, but also about the future of this world. And we get absolutely nothing from her, at least not in that regard. As the story of Odin is told, you could forget that Toki is a Void Century time traveler because it's almost never addressed. And I suppose that actually may be for the best because her story almost certainly ties into the giant mysteries of the series. And in the future, we'll definitely see how the Toki cog fits into the history machine inevitably. But could we not have had just one little like itty bitty tiny nugget of intrigue? From starving to overstuffed now, man complaining about comics on the internet point number 7 is that the chain of power-ups got a little bit ridiculous. By which I specifically mean Luffy. In such quick succession, he mastered Advanced Armament Haki, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, and awakened his Devil Fruit, all over the course of essentially one arc climax. And the wildest part is that even after all of those power-ups, I still never quite felt that Luffy was at the point of actually overwhelming Kaido. Luffy versus Kaido to me feels like it was missing one penultimate phase before the finishing blow. Because in the end, it was less that Luffy beat Kaido, and more that Kaido decided to be beaten by arrogantly tanking the punch. That punch, by the way, does bring up a rather infamous Eiichiro Oda statement where he said, "Probably my audience will not be satisfied if the reason for defeating Kaido is just because Luffy's punch is so strong. Luffy and I have to find a solution somehow." Now, I'm personally of the opinion that, of course, it wasn't just a strong punch. There were 2 Haki advancements and a whole awakening that went into it. But also, when it comes down to it, it was basically just a bigger, stronger punch. And I think that Oda may have actually made Kaido too strong. That's not my problem with him, though. My issue with him is number 8, and it's that I still don't understand / quite buy his motivation. Kaido had the potential to be the greatest antagonist in One Piece, but then he just didn't. His flashback, whilst insightful, was not enough. I don't know how he made the transition from happy young pirate man in the early days with King to depressed, cruel, and cynical alcoholic. I say all the time that a One Piece arc is only as strong as its main antagonist. And despite being the strongest creature in the world, Kaido doesn't quite get there for me. I honestly believe that Doflamingo, Katakuri, and even Big Mom were better antagonists. I feel like I understand all 3 of them. I don't agree with them, but I understand them. And each of them are legitimately empathetic in their own unique ways. With Kaido, I can't even get that far. And like I said with Zoro, this was a now or never moment for Kaido. I can't imagine that we're going to take time out in the future for a Kaido deep dive. This was his moment to shine, and instead of oiling himself up for glorious presentation, Kaido decided to roll around in the dirt, and instead of shining, he became rather dulled. Even then, he was still pretty great, so that's forgivable to me. Everything so far has. Nothing is series breaking by any means, but there are still still two things about Wano that don't sit well with me, and both of them happened pretty much right at the end. And number 9 is simply Yamato. This character was introduced with a clearer purpose than any other. We had a streamlined mission to join the Straw Hats and fulfill the will of Kozuki Oden. So when given the opportunity to do exactly that, Yamato declines, and declines for what is, in my opinion, no good reason. I'm not here to argue whether or not Yamato would have made a great Straw Hat, but I am here to argue that the fact that Yamato isn't aboard the ship right now, given everything we've seen and heard, makes no sense at all. I guess I'm going to say it for a third time, but this was a now or never moment. Luffy is literally setting sail from Wano to become the Pirate King as we speak, and Yamato declined this adventure in favor of traveling around Wano, a task that will take a week or two at most, and is also completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of finishing Oden's task about bringing about the dawn of the world and, all of the stuff it is we're trying to do. I think the worst part of it is that it happened off screen. After the raid, Yamato was still hell-bent on becoming a Straw Hat, so whatever epiphany occurred, it happened off screen, and we just saw the results. Reading 1057 felt like I'd skipped a chapter, because if you are going to bait and switch like this, then that's fine, that's called a plot twist, they're cool. But I think at the very least we need to see the moment where that actually makes sense. The reason why Yamato can't join right now is clearly more of a meta purpose. Oda has a different plan, and I guess this chess piece just needs to be elsewhere. I just wish he could have come up with an excuse that I'd actually buy, because as a result, Yamato is now a bit of a broken character for me. But with that said, I think the biggest flaw of Wano is the incredibly abrupt ending. Wano's ending was rushed, and we know this for a fact. It was revealed that Oda sped up the story to, quote, make it fit with the release of Film Red. So what we have is a situation where Oda spent almost 4 years painstakingly setting up the most ambitious story he's ever tried to tell, and just as he is about to land this narrative plane ever so smoothly, he decided that crashing the plane would actually get us there a bit faster, and we rushed the climax of this 4-year story in order to construct a coordinated marketing push to tie into the release of a non-canon film. And it's a shame because satisfying endings are important. It'd be kind of like if I spent roughly 10 minutes building up this video only to have it end with,